TV's Dr. Oz is now officially the Republicans' U.S. Senate candidate for Pennsylvania this year, and yet it's his dual citizenship which is casting a cloud over his campaign. Today we're going to talk all about it. We've been telling you for a decade here at Nomad Capitalist that getting dual citizenship gives you options. It is something that you want to work towards, whether you're claiming citizenship by descent, whether you want to give birth to your kids in another country, whether you want to make an investment and get citizenship that way in as little as a matter of months. It's a good idea to have not one passport, but two. Here's an example of when that may not come in handy. I'm going to explain why. This probably won't apply to you, but it's worth talking about. Now, if it's your first time here, my name's Andrew Henderson. I'm the founder of Nomad Capitalist. We're a boutique consultancy that helps 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best, lower taxes, diversifying your assets internationally, having a second passport. We do it all legally. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com, and we also host the biggest and best offshore conference called Nomad Capitalist Live. So, article from the Washington Examiner came out talking about Mehmet Oz's explanation of why he kept Turkish citizenship and why it makes no sense. Basically, Dr. Oz was running in the Republican primary for Senate. It got really close at the end, and it took a while to figure out that he was actually the winner. And one of the issues that was brought up in the Republican primary, and presumably will continue to be brought up throughout this general election, is he is a dual citizen with Turkey. So basically, he was born in the United States, I think not so far from where I was born, but his parents were from Turkey, and so therefore he was given Turkish citizenship. So always a good idea to check your parents. People are often so focused on looking at their grandparents, their great-grandparents for citizenship by descent, they'll forget that, hey, my mother was born in Mexico, or my father was born in Canada, and therefore they're Canadian, or they're Mexican, and therefore, presumably, I can be Mexican or Canadian, or fill in the blank. We've seen many cases like that. We've helped people get those citizenships. But the article from the Washington Examiner says, Mehmet Oz, the television doctor turned Republican Senate candidate in Pennsylvania, continues to fend off criticism regarding his ties to Turkey. He's really come under fire for the idea that as a dual citizen, he's going to not be able to decide the U.S. versus Turkey. Obviously, even though Turkey is a NATO country, there have been some disagreements between the U.S. and Turkey on a number of issues. And so Turkey, which, by the way, happens to have a citizenship by investment program, you can either buy $400,000 in real estate, you can put $500,000 in Turkish lira in the bank, or you can hire a bunch of people, and you can get citizenship in a matter of months. There are politicians that are against that, but it is still very much a program. And certainly there are Westerners who have said, I like the idea that this country is not quite as cozy with the West. I want some diversification. I'd like to be a Turkish citizen. Mehmet Oz was born with that. And so unlike you, who is a business person, who is an investor, who's going to benefit from if your country starts saying we're going to raise taxes and chase you to the ends of the earth to collect them, or we're going to impose some new regulation, or we're going to try and make your life difficult in some way, you're going to say, you know what? I'll get this other passport. I'm going over there. Leave me alone. Right? If you're going to run for political office, you may have more troubles. I typically don't make content presuming people want to do political office, even though we have worked with a few folks who ultimately kind of pulled back on their plans because they wanted to go and run for Senate, for example. So if you want to run for political office in your home country, being a dual citizen, especially one where it's like citizenship by investment in the Caribbean in some kind of tax-free country, probably not the look. I would say that you're going to get a much better return on your investment by not running for political office. But the article continues. While several sitting senators were born abroad, Oz's foreign ties are more problematic for a number of reasons. First, Oz's ties to Turkey are not simply a matter of birth. He served in the Turkish military, which is a condition of being a natural-born Turkish citizen. Citizens by investment really don't have to deal with that generally. In some cases, your kids might, but there's a fee you can pay. It's pretty reasonable just to not do it. But he served, I think it was a matter of months, I read somewhere, where he stood around Istanbul and guarded Pera Palace or something. But he did serve in the Turkish military, and he voted in a recent Turkish election, reportedly just days after failing to do so in the United States. The article goes on to say that his interaction with the Turkish president is quote-unquote cringeworthy. It doesn't really back any of that up. Then says that Oz had repeatedly deflected criticism by saying he's retained his Turkish citizenship to care for his mother better. The explanation is dishonest, the article says. Oz could care for his mother regardless of his citizenship status. Until recently, Americans could go to a booth at Turkey's major international airports to get a Turkish visa for $20. The whole process took less than 5 minutes, even when there was a line. And when I went to Turkey in 2012, back then as an American, you stood in line. They wanted $20 in cold, hard U.S. cash. And you just basically stamped something and then you went to a separate line. It was pretty efficient. You didn't do anything. Now, as the article points out, they have an e-visa process. And so if you're an American, I think a lot of countries, Turkey's actually opened up visa-free. It used to be if you were British or a number of other countries, you had to get an e-visa. The U.S. is one of the few one of the few Western countries left where you have to get an e-visa, but you just go online and yeah, it takes about 2 minutes. I mean, literally, I was with someone not so long ago where we were laying over in Istanbul, we had a long layover, we're sitting in the lounge, and they're like, oh, I wanted to go do something like outside, but I don't have the passport I can get in with, can I get an e-visa? And I'm like, yeah, let's go online. Within like 45 seconds, they had it. They went to the desk at the lounge, can you print this out? Off they went through immigration, and a couple hours later, I saw them come back in. It is pretty straightforward. And so that's exactly what the article says. So that Oz uses visas as an excuse is both dishonest and arrogant. It's dishonest because it's patently wrong. It's arrogant because Oz believes that not only the citizens of Pennsylvania, but also journalists are too unworldly. Well, if that was his view, then he's probably right, I'm sorry to say. I mean, you think the average person's like, let me tell you about Turkish e-visa policy. That by design, Turkey's visa regime is among the easiest in the world. I don't know if that's entirely true. It's one of the relatively easier ones, no doubt. But it kind of shows the author's unworldliness, as it were, that they're not aware of countries that are open to far more people. From a Western perspective, sure, Turkey is relatively open. But from a Western perspective, Europe's Schengen area is open. Mexico is open. I mean, a lot of countries are open for Western citizens. So it's not entirely worldly to suggest that Turkey has the easiest visa regime in the world, but has a point. And so I talked to a number of friends of mine who work in Turkey. We do help people get Turkish citizenship, buy property, open bank accounts, what have you. And they said, yeah, generally speaking, I mean, people are on relatively equal footing here in Turkey. And so if he just wanted to come and care for his mother, I mean, I've gone through numerous processes in terms of purchasing a property in Turkey with power of attorney. It's a pretty formal process, quite frankly, compared to a lot of other places where you have to go to like the same notary's office. I mean, there's a formality to if he, for example, needed to care for his mother, he needed to kind of, a power of attorney to make decisions or a living will or whatever. I mean, I think that there would be enough formality, but you can do that as a foreigner, is my point. I've done that as a foreigner when buying property. And so, yeah, I think that from everything I know about Turkey and the people that I've talked to, not really a lot of difference from American coming to assist his Turkish mother, who presumably I think was naturalized in the United States at one point, right? But moved back to Turkey, I think. And so could he do all those decisions? Yes. Does that mean that it's not a little easier to maintain Turkish citizenship and get in? Well, number one, as a citizen, you're always going to get in. And so just the nature of this article where the author is taking shots at the Turkish government perhaps speaks to some rifts between the two countries that, listen, there was a time just a couple years ago when Americans were really not allowed into Turkey. There were a few carve-outs, but you could not get an e-visa as an American because the two governments had a kind of a tit for tat. And so I think Turks couldn't apply for U.S. visas, but Americans couldn't get e-visas and couldn't generally get visa on arrival also. So I remember I had a friend, I think it was back in 2018, who was American. I was going to Turkey. He's like, hey, can't join you. I'm flying through, but I can't join you because I'm only a U.S. citizen. And so what's the consequence of having a passport where the country gets into feuds? Now, you could say that about either country. Certainly, I lived in the U.S. for many years, and I would say that about the U.S., it means that you have a higher likelihood of being locked out of a country, for example, than if you were a citizen of St. Lucia, where nobody is really too busy to bother. And so perhaps that's what he's mentioning. He's mentioning like, hey, I'd like the guaranteed access to be able to get in. Now, could he get a residence permit? Sure. There may be different ways to do that, whether through potentially through his ancestry. I'm not so sure about that, but certainly through real estate investment, that kind of thing. So if he owns a property, he could perhaps get a residence permit. Would a residence permit be at a high enough level if something happened between Turkey and the U.S.? Do keep in mind, when you're a citizen of the U.S. or Turkey, you're supposed to enter those respective countries on your passport from that country. So you can't enter the U.S. as a Turk you would need a visa, and the U.S. is not going to issue a tourist visa to its own citizen, right? And so when you go to Turkey, you're a Turkish citizen, and so you can't, like, he can't go to Turkey and, you know, do something wrong and then be like, oh, U.S. Embassy, can you help me out? The U.S. may certainly speak up and say, hey, let this guy go, but to Turkey, he's a Turkish citizen. And that's true for a lot of different countries, especially kind of larger countries like this. So theoretically, the idea of guaranteed access that citizenship provides, particularly when his other citizenship may have an issue with Turkey at some point in the future, that does offer some validity in terms of once he's actually in the country taking care of his mother, whether it's, you know, documentary issues, whether it's actually, you know, owning property or taking possession of property, really not a big difference there. And as someone who's a U.S. citizen, from a tax perspective, he's always going to be taxed on things like capital gains or disposal of property as a U.S. citizen. So even any benefits that he would get with Turkey, which I don't really know of any that exist, aren't really going to matter. And so while the article itself sort of speaks to the fact that people in the United States have a dim view of Turkey and perhaps don't understand the full context, I would argue that there are plenty of parts of the U.S. where the criticisms made of the Turkish government apply just the same. You're telling me there aren't parts of the U.S. where they basically want to shut down every other point of view that they don't have? You could say that for both sides of the equation. And I know, you know, people on each side don't admit that their side does it also. You're telling me that there aren't people who would like to have one religion in parts of the United States? Of course there are. Perhaps not in New York or in Los Angeles, or even Columbus, Ohio. But you know what? Yeah, there are probably parts of the world where they want that. Does that mean that all these attacks that are made on Turkey should be made against the governors or the mayors or the people in charge of those areas? So I do think there is a negative perception by Americans against a bunch of other places that aren't entirely like their country. And I'm not saying Turkey's the answer. It is certainly a second citizenship that allows you to make an investment, not a donation, get a passport in a very short period of time. The actual costs, the sunk costs, aren't really that substantial. And you have an asset you can sell in the future, or you have 50 employees that you can use to build your business. I'm not saying everyone should do that. We help people make that determination all the time. But what I'm saying is, why is it that if someone is a dual citizen of Canada, and you've seen Ted Cruz renounce Canadian citizenship, I think Michelle Bachmann back in, 2012, renounced Swiss citizenship. Every time I see that guy, I'm like, why? Oh, to have Swiss citizenship. Oh, to have Canadian citizenship. They're giving up the wrong one, but they want to be politicians, and so they gave it up. But yet nobody was really questioning Michelle Bachmann's loyalties. Okay, they were questioning, why are you a dual citizen of any kind? Just, we don't like that because the average person thinks that, like, she's now going to be skewed. I've known people who've run for political office who are dual citizens with European countries, and I don't know that, in their case, anybody really cared. But at a higher level, dual citizenship can get in the way. This particular case, people are saying, oh, Turkey, we've heard some things. Listen, again, no place is perfect. And that would include Turkey. But the idea that, he shouldn't have the dual citizenship, people will make up their minds. And as a political issue, maybe people say, we don't like these worldly people. We don't like someone whose parents are from somewhere else. I guess certainly people are capable of, in a democratic system, of making whatever decisions they want, whether right or wrong, whether fair or not. I certainly wouldn't want to give up dual citizenship to have the privilege of running for office and being skewered in public. I think there's plenty of ways, if you're just a wealthy person looking for the next step of having some power, there's plenty of ways in the 2020s that you can do that without running for political office. Heck, get a citizenship somewhere else and run for political office there. It does work in some cases. But the idea that he needs the passport to take care of his mother, not really seeing how that works. The idea that he needs it perhaps to be able to go in and just make sure he can get into the country in the case of an emergency, I can see why that works. And I certainly do see all the time folks that we work with from, let's say, the United States, who are like, hey, I wouldn't mind giving up my U.S. citizenship, but I need to make sure I can come back and, if my father passes away, go to the funeral. Or if my father is, at the end of his life, make sure I'm there with him. And I think, unlike Turkey, the United States is much more likely to say, you know what, no. Because the visa process in the U.S. is one of the most difficult in the world. I'm not saying people don't get tourist visas and other types of visas all the time. Certainly it would be easier to get a visa to go into Turkey, again, assuming that the U.S. and Turkey don't have some kind of spat, and assuming that there's not a pandemic happening, and assuming any number of other black swan events aren't going on to where a country might restrict access only to its citizens. For those reasons, I get the point in keeping it. For the other reasons, I don't really understand.